So we're animating an inanimate object, and in this case, we're going to animate a pair of scissors. So we need to prepare a file, and we've got a photo of scissors that's in Photoshop, and we need to build this file out so that when we take it into After Effects, we can import it as a composition, and we have the different parts of the scissors on separate layers or separate elements. That way we'll be able to animate it however we want. So this is a fairly simple, scissors, pliers, anything like that are pretty simple, and they're just a single hinged object. So we're just going to animate them kind of open and close or some odd thing like that. So when we prepare our file, I've got this photo, and we actually need to duplicate that layer a couple of times. And on the first layer, we want to have just this back arm for the scissors. So if I turn this one off, so if I turn on this back arm, you'll see that that's just that one half of the scissors. And then I've got the front half of the scissors on a separate layer. So each one's individual. And the easiest way to think about this, scissors are pretty simple, but think about a Swiss Army knife or some odd thing like that. The easiest way to think about this is that I want to have the object on different layers in my Photoshop file, just the same way that if I had to pop this pin out of the middle or the screw, and it would come apart, so I'd have the same basic thing, because I want to be able to rotate each of these parts around this hinged area. So this is the way we're preparing our file. Make sure it's plenty big. I'm building a 1920 by 1080 image, so this pair of scissors needs to be at least that big. If it's small and you try to blow it up, it gets all soft and fuzzy and ugly. So we just need to prepare this the right way. And I usually I'm going to leave these two layers in, and I'm only going to use the front and the back though. So I've got those. I could probably do some color adjustment overall on this if I wanted, but we're going to start with this, and I can always color adjust them later and then re-import it into my After Effects file. So we have our file, we save it, and then we will take it over, we'll go over into After Effects, and we'll import the file into our document. What comes next when we import this file is that we have to import it a certain way. Otherwise, we get either one single image of scissors, which doesn't do anything for us because we want to animate the different parts, or we get something with image sequences. And again, that doesn't really do a whole lot for us. We just need the two parts that we can animate. So I'm gonna new project, and then import the file. And we'll go into our, let's see, After Effects, Assets. Here are my scissors. And so select that file. And before I hit the open button, I need to look at a couple of things. First is I want to import this as a composition. If I import it as footage, it'll come in as one element. That's not what I want. So composition, and there's two options here. We're going to use retain layer sizes. And this will make sure that each of the halves of our scissors are just the size of the image. If we select composition, then it'll bring in the parts we need, but the scissors are going to be inside of a bounding box that's the size of our composition. So make sure you choose composition, retain layer sizes, and create composition. Do not check Photoshop sequence in this case. So we'll say open, say okay, and we've got our scissors. So we brought that in. So there's our composition, and here are the different layers that were in our file. And then I've got one more thing I'm going to import, and I'm just going to import a photo. I think this is it. And I have a photo of denim. So You can go find whatever photos you want to work with, but I've got that, which came in as a composition, which is okay, I guess. Let's close that up. All right. So we've got our comp. And if I open my scissors, I'll just open the composition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these two pieces. So I open my scissors composition. I'll copy those. I'm going back to my main comp. Hold on. All right. Go back to my main comp. And I'm just going to paste those in there, which will come in very big. Pull them up. And I'm not going to scale them or anything yet. So if you remember what we did, I think we did on Monday, we parented some objects together, and we can do that here too. Because remember, anytime, we always want our front and our back to our scissors. I mean, this one unit held together by a hinge. We want that always to move together. But if I just parent these two objects together, what happens when you parent objects is that if I decide to parent the front, I'm looking at this little area right here on my timeline. If I decide to parent my front to the back, basically anytime I move the back object, the front will go with it. But if I select to move the front object, it'll go by itself. So the parent is the back, the child is the front of them, and they kind of operate independently. And that's probably really not what we want, but it is a one-to-one relationship that way is good in a lot of cases. So you can make that relationship directly, but just keep in mind that if I do that here, great. So I'll close up the back, or I'll close up the front, and that'll go. But then when I go to close up the back, the front's going to move with it because the front was parented to the back. It's going to follow and do anything the back does, basically. And that has to do with where I move it in the viewport, how I scale it, move it, scale it, rotate it, you name it, bless you. It'll follow it. So what I actually want to do is incorporate a third element into this. And this is where there's another item. If I go down here to my timeline and I right click, there's new, and there's a whole bunch of items here. We'll look at cameras and lights and stuff, but there's a null object. And basically what a null object is it's just an object that's going to be on your screen that isn't rendered. It's not an actual actor on your screen, but it is an object that I can use to constrain other objects too. So if I put this null object in my scene here, you'll see that it's really just a red bounding box. It's nothing that, if I render this out, that null object's not going to render. It's invisible. But what I can do is move it so that the center point of it is right on wherever I want that hinge to be. And then I can parent both of my objects, the front and the back, to that null object. So now when I want to move the scissors as a whole, I'll move the null object, but then I can animate the right and left halves independently that way. So if we look at this, the center point of that null object is always on this upper corner. You can leave it there. It's whatever's most comfortable to you. I think I'm actually going to make it a little bit bigger so that it takes up a little more space. And then I'm going to go get that pan behind tool and move my center object just to the middle of, actually I don't even have to move it. I can right click on my null object, transform, and I can center my anchor point within the layer content, within that object. What did I do? Oh, I grabbed the wrong object. I need to pay closer attention to what I'm doing. All right, now I got my null. Right click, transform, and I can center the anchor point within there, which will move it right to the middle. And I'm going to place that center point right on top of that hinge. And now, instead of parenting, if we look down here in my timeline, I can grab this little pick whip next to my parent and link, drag it up to the null for the front of the scissors, and I can drag it up to the null for the back of the scissors. So that now, when I grab this null and move it, everything goes with it, but yet I can animate the halves independently. Nulls like this are used a lot when you do character animation. If we do FK character animation, which is just kind of moving the joints, you know, setting up something like this is pretty common when you do that kind of thing. So, and I'm going to rename my null object. If I just select my null object and hit return, this is going to be my scissors controller, or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't really matter. So now, if I, with my controller, if I tap my S key for scale and scale that null down, everything else goes with it. And if I move my null, my scissors will go with it. Make sure I got the right object. That's the one thing you always got to watch out for, making sure you've got the right object in your timeline selected. So I kind of rigged up my object that way. I've got three elements, that null, which is what's going to kind of tie everything together, and then I can animate the halves independently. So I can, I think I want to make my, yes? So if you right click, the easiest way I think is to right click down here in your timeline, new null object. And then I can grab the front of my scissors. Let's zoom in here a little bit. Grab my rotate tool. Oh, I know what I didn't do yet. All right, so I've got everything parented to that null, and I got to do one other thing so I can rotate my halves, which is basically I always want that half to rotate right on the center of that hinge pin. So I just need to go back to that pan behind or anchor point tool and grab my anchor point and slide it right onto that hinge for both of my objects. So that now I've got the back selected and I grab my rotate tool, I can move that around. And I'll just kind of pull him down about there. Grab the front, pull him about there. And he's kind of ready to animate and to do whatever I want to with. So grab my scissors. And see if I mean, this null, I scaled it before, but I can move its position around. I can rotate it. Wherever I've got, wherever the center point of that object is where it's going to rotate. So I probably could have actually slid this object back more towards the center. I mean, I only wanted to control things. I guess it didn't have to be right on top of that hinge pin, now that I think about it, but actually maybe sliding it back wouldn't have been a bad idea, which maybe I'll do. Let's just see how that works out. I'm going to unlink those. Grab my scissors controller. I want to actually slide it back some. More towards the middle. And then I'll reparent both of these back to that. Yeah, and everything still works the way it's supposed to. And if I decide at some point I want to spin the scissors around, I can do that with the null point. So from there, we can pretty much animate this however we want to. Any other questions? Any questions about that on that? It's similar to the things we did Monday. But just going to kind of center that up. So I'm going to add two other objects here because we're going to look at a couple of different things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put a background in this, and I don't want it to be black. So I'm just going to grab my, I can either do it with a rectangle, draw a rectangle out, or another object. If I right-click down here in my timeline again, right-click, go to New, I can add a solid, which is just going to be the solid's going to be the size of my composition, and it'll be whatever color I really want it to be. And I can change it after the fact too, but I'll make it like a slate blue, maybe. Say OK. And I can drag that to the bottom. So we can either put a background in by drawing it with a rectangle, or right-click and we can add it as a solid. A solid's fairly convenient as well. And then, let's see. The last thing I want to do, so I imported that piece of that image of denim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tile or like a circle of that denim behind it. So here's my photo, and I can just drag that in. We'll scale it down. Something like that. Put it down here behind. So I don't want it to fill my screen. I actually want it, I'm going to mask this. So there are a couple of different ways to create a mask, which masking is something you're probably likely going to want to do, I would think, in your movie poster project, or very well could. So, like I said, masking's done a couple of different ways. One is, so if I select my object, and I want to put it, do a circular mask, I can either select my ellipse tool, make sure that my background image is selected, this denim, and draw out my circle. So long as I have the object selected, anytime I use the ellipse tool, the square tool, or whatever, it's actually going to add to that object. Here's my denim. It adds a new category titled mask. And if I open that up, there's that mask path, and I can do different things with that. So if I select the mask, I should be able to just, I think, move it. So I'll just kind of center it up a little bit behind my scissors. And that gives me a masked object. There's different settings inside of this mask. So there's the path, which I can reset to a rectangle or whatever else. Feather. So if I slide this feather option, I can soften the mask. Maybe I made it too big. Mask expansion. If I slide it to the right, it'll expand the mask. To the left, it'll choke it or pull it in. So we can create masks that way. And we can also give it an opacity. If we don't want it to be full strength, you can toy around with those a little bit. But I think I'm just going to keep it, we'll keep it soft edged. So there's one way of creating a mask. And that's just much like a clipping mask you'd make in Photoshop or anything else for that matter. The second way I can do this, and I'll just bring my denim back in again, turn off the one I was just working with, and scale this down. Another way I can do this, I'll deselect that object and go back to my ellipse, or maybe I'll use a star tool this time. I can draw a shape out. Slide it down kind of the middle. And oops, that's not the one I wanted. I can create a shape, drop it below the layer that I want to mask, and I'm looking at this set of switches right now, but down here at the very bottom of this window, and I think I showed you this before, but there's an option, toggle switches and modes. If I click on that, I get, these get so sort of bunched up, but nothing I can do about it. So by putting that object below the object that I want to mask, I can, this column of objects right here is track mask, and I can mat it to my shape layer 1, or mask it, and it acts as a clipping mask. So it's kind of like Photoshop, where if you can use one layer as a clipping mask, a lower layer is a clipping mask for a top layer. This works the same way. The benefit to this is that while I probably actually, if I want to move this star around, I probably actually want to parent my photo to that shape so they move together. The benefit here, though, is that if I can always animate this object out of that mask and then animate it in. if I wanted. I can't do that as easily. I could probably do it with the path mask, but I can't do this kind of thing as easily. And this could be good for reveals and that kind of stuff. If you want to slide in one piece of video or one image over top of another, works out pretty well that way. So this method of masking also, I just did it with a white star. If I had a black star, it would work the same way. I would just need to change this from an alpha mask to a Luma mask. Remember, white is anything within a mask, just like in Photoshop. If it's black, it's transparent. If it's white, you can see it within your masks. It's the same way in After Effects. If your underlying object is white, you're just going to alpha mask it. If your underlying object is black, then there's an object to Luma mask it. Wrong one, which is right here. I can change this to a different type of mask. It's kind of a lot to remember, I know, but just to run through it, there are ways to mask stuff out. So to Gabe's question on Monday about how he would add flames to an object, remember that we can create a mask using this method out of any black and white image. So if I've got a photo, say I've got a video of flames, I could, and I can do this so you can see it, but I can take that, I can create a duplicate of that photo, and on the duplicate, I could convert that to black and white. I mean, After Effects has a whole bunch of color correction channels just like Photoshop does. So I could convert it to black and white, and then I could adjust levels or brightness, darkness to where I get the flames to be just white and the area around it black. And then I can mask, using this method, the color flames onto the black and white one that I create. So basically you create a mask out of the object you want to mask, if that makes sense. It's just a black and white image. So we can do, once I get through all of this, if you want to see it, we can do that. I've got a picture of flames and we can look at it. So those are different ways of masking an object. So I've kind of put a composition together. I haven't done any animating really yet. I just kind of put everything into place. So let's see. We'll stick with the star because it's a little on the fun side. So I want to animate my scissors. So I want to bring them on to my scene and then make them open and close, and we're going to mess with the timing a little bit on that. So I'll close up all of these. I got my scissor controller. I'm going to lock down anything that I don't want to inadvertently do something with. See, so we did masking. All right. So I'm going to grab the scissors controller, and at 0, just like we did with the B, I'm going to slide him off the side, tap P for position, and set a keyframe, and then come over here to about, I don't know, 4 seconds. Actually, zoom this down. Come over to 3 seconds. Take this, and I'm going to move him over into position. So over 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, he slides into position. So I animated him. in a very simple kind of way. Actually, I want to shorten all of this up. Let's take that to 8 and zoom in. All right. And maybe that's too long, but we'll adjust it later. So I don't like how he moves to start with. He just kind of slides in, comes to a halt. So in Premiere, we looked at easing. And we can do the same thing in After Effects, and it works exactly the same way. If I right-click on this keyframe, which is my last one, right-click on it, at the very bottom is Keyframe Assistant, and I can select Easy Ease, or Ease In. I could do Ease In as well. I usually just do Easy Ease because it gives me handlebars on both of my points. So Easy Ease or Ease In, one of the two. Do Easy Ease, changes the icon. So as he comes across now, he stops a little smoother, eases into that position a little bit, which is what I want. But just like I could modify the way it eases in Premiere, I can do that in After Effects too. So there's, over here on my timeline, there's this little box with a little curly in it. It's the graph editor. So if I click that, right now I'm animating with keyframes, but if I click on that, it changes it to a Bezier. And it's always going to remember the last one you worked with. So probably when you do it, it'll actually look like this, which is a value graph. And it shows that as it comes into the frame, it slows down as it gets to this point. So this is its speed. And as it gets closer to its final point, it just kind of eases into it. And that's what that curve demonstrates. And I can't really I could ease into that a little bit more by adding an additional keyframe here maybe and sliding it up. But there's an easier way to ease into this point, which involves modifying the speed graph. So this is, like I said, the value graph. If I right-click, I can switch to the speed graph, which is this one. So it comes in right into its final position. If I just click on this and hold down the Shift key, this graph indicates the speed. So it's fastest here, and it slows as it gets to the end. So now if I slide this back, see the difference in the movement of my scissors? Eases into position an awful lot slower. We were able to do this in Premiere, but Premiere doesn't really seem to have, I feel like there's an awful lot more control in After Effects to do this kind of thing. So if you really want to ease that in, that's the way you go about it. And at any point, you can go back to your keyframes by clicking there. And we could slide this in and shorten this time span up a little bit. Maybe it slides in a little too slowly. I don't know. Take a look. But it's a much more refined movement when you ease things in. It's very linear otherwise. So we ease in that way. And then going back to my keyframes, I want to animate the jaws of the scissors opening. So I'm just going to open them once and close them again. Something simple to start with. So I'll kind of zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. And selecting these two, my front and my back, I'm just going to tap R on my keyboard for rotate. And let's see, when he gets in here, he hits there. I'll set a keyframe for my rotation there on those. I can do them both at the same time. Then from this point forward, I need to do them separately. But I'm just going to slide over to 3 seconds. Select the front ones, grab my rotate tool, open them up, go to the back ones, select my rotate tool and open them up. Something like that. See, so it eases in, they open, and then I'm going to close them again. But rather than try to get them back in the exact right spot, I'm just going to select my first keyframe, copy it with my time indicator there. I'm just going to paste it in place. And I'm going to do the same thing up on this one. Copy it, and then I can paste it. Whenever I paste it, it'll go in right wherever that playhead is. So it slides in, they open, and they close again. And again, not too interesting. They just kind of open, they close. It could be a little more dynamic than that. So I'm going to do that by, when they get to when they're wide open, I'm going to select those, I'm going to easy ease those. And see if we watch that, they see it opens up. So it's sort of eases into that top point a little bit. It's a little nicer. Maybe that's all you need. I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit. So while I'm here, go into my graph editor, which looks like all sorts of funky at the moment. Because I have both of these selected, I'm seeing the speed graph for both, or the speed graph for both of them. If I just select one, select rotate, I can pull these out, and then I'll go to this one. So this, again, this line, it's a constant rate of motion from top to bottom. And by pulling out the speed graph handles, it's opening up quickly, slows as it gets to that highest point, slows as it starts to drop, and then speeds up into its final resting point. So if we look at how those go now, a little bit of a pause there at the top, creates a little bit of drama, a little bit of tension, and then it closes. A nicer movement than I had when I started. This is kind of why easing is so important when you're animating. Even whenever you animate type, when you anything you animate, easing makes a world of difference in the way what you do presents itself. And there's all sorts of reasons that you'll use easing. Like I just did there, when it opens up, it just sort of, they open up, they just sort of hang there for a minute, and then they close up. Creates a little bit of tension, a little bit of suspense. If I handled the back end of this differently so that it doesn't snap down into place, so that maybe it opens up quickly, hangs there, and then eases down into place, I could mimic something that's much more of a sigh. So if I'm trying to give personality to my scissors, he might have gotten to where he wanted to be, and he's comfortable. Easing is kind of also the way you tell a story. And you really just got to kind of play around with easing and work with it to get really comfortable with it. But I know when I first started working with After Effects, I didn't know how to get to the speed graph, and I didn't even realize it was there. Once I realized that speed graph was there, it kind of changed the way everything felt. I had so much more control than I did prior. So it's a lot of right clicking and everything else, but it makes the difference. So I'm going to switch back. Let's look at that again. So it opens up, closes, and I can still mess around with my keyframes as much as I want. So what I don't like now, most of the time, so another technique of animation to make things feel natural is that very seldom do things, you animate stuff to one position, then animate it to do something else, then animate it to do something else. Things usually aren't that linear, by and large. So the next concept of all of this is to kind of overlap movements. So my scissors move into place, they sort of ease in there, and then they open and they close. And I guess that's okay, but if I select these and slide them back so that prior to getting to its final resting place, it starts its next motion, it's going to have more of a natural kind of a feel. I've got overlapping movements, overlapping sequences, kind of starts to pull it all together a little bit more. And I mean, the nice thing about keyframe animation is that I can do those as completely separate kinds of things. I could do my slide it into place up to 3 seconds. I could move down to 5 and 6 seconds to do my next animation. But then I can grab those keyframes, slide them back to where I want them to get things to work the way I want them. So you can kind of move stuff around. Don't be afraid to move them around. It's also I timed this the same amount of time to open, same amount of time to close. Maybe instead of doing that, I'm actually going to have it snap down a little bit more. So I'm going to move this third set of keyframes on my open and close tighter so that when it does this, it moves in, opens, and snaps closed. That changes that dynamic. So I move it in, they snap closed, and that's not a bad motion. I could refine when it closes, I think, a little bit more. I could play around with those curves, but that works pretty decently. And now that I've done all that, remember that I've got my scissors are actually attached to that null object, so I can animate that null object however I want. So snap and close, and I'm going to do a little flippy thing with it. So tap R on my keyboard, let's see. Open, they close, and then set rotation, and I can either grab my rotate tool and spin them around back into place. Actually, I forgot to move my playhead. So I can move my playhead forward a little bit. And I can either use my rotate tool to spin him around into place, or if I look at the rotate option here on my timeline, there's a number, X, and then, or number plus 0.0 degrees. If I just change the first 0 to 1, that'll rotate it one rotation. So he comes in and he flips. If I want him to go the other direction, I'd go -1, and it would flip him counterclockwise. And I can use the degrees here to go, I mean, I could have set that to 360 degrees as well. That would have been one rotation. So you can use those that way as well. And I want to I don't want that to be quite so the way it is. I'm going to easy ease it. I'm going to zip it around and easing into spot. He flips. And that's what I wanted to do. I actually think it'd probably look a little bit better if he flipped, zipped around, and instead of just easing right in the perfect spot, maybe if he overshoots and pops back. So, can go back over here, zoom in, so we can see what we're doing. Maybe right here, I rotate this a little further so that so that when he flips, he goes past and snaps back up into place. Again, a little better movement, a little more fun. Usually when stuff rotates that way, it doesn't just stop right on the dime. So he snaps into place. Maybe that should be a little, move my keyframes, change that timing a little bit. Maybe I drag this out a little bit, make it last a little longer. There we go. And that works pretty well. So it just kind of flips and snaps into place. And that's most of what I'm going to do. So there are a couple other little things. So let's see, maybe I'll do this. So so my star's already on the scene. He comes in, snaps, flips. Maybe I want to start it with a blank screen, zoom my star in, and then have him come in. So let's make that change. And I'm going to do that simply by, let's see, let's pull out the 10 frames. Here's my star. I'm going to start, let's go to 20 frames. And I'm just going to do the scale on this, I think. Scale, 100%. Go back to 10 frames. Make this 0. My denim went away because it's masked to that star. I scaled it to 0, which means it doesn't really exist on the scene. But when it grows into position, it's got that denim in place. So I can do that. And I still want to do all those same things I was doing before. I want to ease into my final position. Easy ease. Do it a little bit. But I want the star to come in first, and then the scissors to start in. So I can take, actually, yeah. So I can take all these objects, slide them forward. So now they don't start until later, but they do all the same animations that I already had set up. If you've already animated an object and you simply want to move its start time forward, it's easier to move the entire timeline for it than it is to go back and to try to adjust your keyframes. So do that. That's the end, and I can animate him out as well if I want to. So, let's see. I did masking. Oh, I know what I didn't do. That I wanted to do. All right. So I kind of got this all where I wanted. Except that right here, I'm going to overshoot my scale a bit. There we go. Do that. One last thing. New trick. All right. So I've got this denim in here. It'd be kind of cool if maybe that denim waved like it's being blown in the wind. So I could have used a flag or anything else. So let's make it wave. So with my photo selected, and I'm going to kind of want to be zoomed in here, I think, so we can see what we got. So After Effects has a whole bunch of different presets and effects that you can utilize. And pretty much if you can imagine it, it's here. But within the standard, the default layout, over here at the side, you'll see effects and presets. And if you open it up, there's a search box here because there are so many options. I mean, there's a boat. If you start opening these up and looking at them, there's a boatload of options. So in the search box, I want to wave. And it's going to show me everything that has the word wave in it. And what I want here is I want to use wave warp, I think. Use wave warp. And when I can either double click on it to add it to that object, because I've got it selected, or I can grab it and drag it onto it. And it will add, if I open that up, it'll add another. So I've got my transform. It adds an effects category with my wave warp under it. And it'll also, the effects controls will also be up here. Best way to get used to the different effects is to play around with them. And on a 1920 by 1080 composition, you've got to really move the numbers a lot. So if I play this through, it's going to zoom into place. If you look real close, you can see that the threads are moving a little bit because the wave height, these settings are really so low. So I can change the type of wave. I'm going to leave it sine, but there's a bunch of different options here. Play around with them to figure them out. I'm going to change the width of the wave and the height of the wave. So where it says 40, I'm just going to click and drag across a lot. Maybe I'm better off changing it to like 500. And I'll change the height to like, I don't know, 150. So it's kind of moving now. And actually, maybe we'll do this. I'm going to turn off, I'm going to hide my scissors so that I can look at what I got going on here. So that's moving pretty fast. I can change the direction of it. Let's change the width from 600 to 700. It's a little better. The speed, I'll drop it from 1 to 0.5, so it's a little more gentle. It's a little better. The easiest way to get used to different effects is to mess with them and work with them. Which brings me to my next recommendation. So it's a good idea, especially if you've got an effect you're looking for and you're not quite sure how to build it. Don't do it in your primary composition. Do a motion test, referred to as motion tests. So you can create new composition. You can create a new composition, place an object in it, apply, like in this case, apply some different deformers or effects to it, play around with them until you see if you can get something you like. And if you got something you like, then you can go back to your main composition and apply all those kinds of settings to them. And it's a better way of working, I think, than having a composition that's got a whole bunch of stuff going on, and you start messing around with some things, and it doesn't work out the way you want. And if you're not careful, you can kind of mess things up. So work on a new composition, figure things out, and then you can always copy everything from one composition into the other, you know? Or, even better, I guess, actually, I could pre-compose, like I did on Monday. I could pre-compose my background, my star, my denim into its own composition, animate it there, and then it'll appear in my primary composition. So you can do all those kinds of things. It's also good to know that all of these different effects stack on top of each other. So you can create an effect from a bunch of different ones, which just learning the software is a bit much of a thing, but work with them one at a time. And then, you know, maybe I want to really make this blue more vibrant or something. I could select that. I could apply, let's see what we got for color. I don't know, there's a whole bunch of different things. We could apply colorized red hand tint. I got no idea what this is, but I'll double click on it. Oh. So it changes the color of my denim. And kind of messing around with the sliders and whatnot is the best way to figure out what it'll do. I've never used this one before, so. But like I said, you can stack these on top of each other. Match colors using RGB. And if you're not sure that it really did anything, this little FX icon, click on it, that turns it off. Click on it to turn it back on. I can stop my wave by turning off the effect and turning it back on. So just like you've got eyeballs to show and hide things, you can turn effects on and off. Best way to get used, like I said, best way to use effects though is to try them, try different things. There are a boatload of tutorials online too for different effects. Take a look at those. I mean, there's a bunch of different stuff you can kind of do there. All right. Any questions about all of that so far? So what I want you to do is, with your object that you photographed, you know, hinge it in Photoshop the way I showed you, and then try to emulate that animation that I did. So, you know, find a photograph, put a background in it, set some masks up, do a simple animation with it. If you didn't follow all of it, I'll be around. I'm happy to show you how to do something again. I also recorded all of this, so I'll put it on my YouTube so you can look at it again if you want. And I'll put a link to, I've got a YouTube channel with about 20 After Effects videos in it for different things, if you want to take a look at them. When I was at Kent, I had to record all of my lectures, so may as well use them. Well, not the lectures, my software demos. God, no, not my lectures. Talk about something that I won't watch. That would be it. But anyway, so I'll go ahead and put it up there. But go ahead and prepare that object the way I showed you. Take it in, start trying to animate it. If you're having trouble, I'll be around. Gabe, do you want to see how to mask fire? What's that? It did. I know. I was leaving it to the end because I wanted you to pay attention. All right, let's see. Somewhere I have, you know what? Here, I'll do this. Video, fire.
That's more fine.
A little better. Explosion? Prefer an explosion?
Yeah, honestly,
Like that?
yeah. Up my crimes to areas instead of just arson.
All right, we'll go for that. See how this one works. All right. After Effects and import my flames. Where is it? Downloads. Import. All right. So, and I imported as a composition. So, I'm just going to open that composition and let's see what we got here. All right. So there it is. All right. So here's my video. I'm going to duplicate it. So Command D on my keyboard will duplicate it. And I'm going to hide the color one and just focus on this one. So, like I said, you can, any black and white image, you can make a mask out of. So with this selected, I'm going to actually go to my, I'm going to go up here to Effects, to Color, Color Correction, and we'll start by changing it to black and white. And while I'm here, I'm also going to add levels. Effect, Color Correction, levels. So we'll do that. All right. Remember, you can stack them on top of each other. So all of my reds, actually black and white may just be the simplest way of doing this entirely. My reds I'm going to pump up, my yellows I'm going to pump up. Basically what I want to create is a black and white, and we'll create a mask for the flames. Yeah. So the nice thing about doing it this way is that once I create this mask, I put it all together, and depending upon what I put it over top of, I can always go back and adjust this color, this black and white color layer, to get everything where I want it to be. So we'll start it there. We'll do that, and it does that. I'm probably going to want a little bit more out here, but that's all right. We'll do that. I'm going to turn the flames back on. And here where it says track mat, I'm going to select, actually, I'm going to name this mask flames. All right, now I'm going to set my mask to those flames. Let's turn on my transparency mode. And I probably actually want to change this to, I want to invert the mat. Which way do I want to go? Not invert the mat. There we go. Change that Luma. As simple as that. Masking is really pretty cool when you consider that all you need is a black and white image of some kind, and if you got video, all you need is a black and white version of the video that you want to mask.
So we make it black and white. You didn't necessarily have to.
Yeah, what I did was I duplicated those flames, and I created that black and white version, and then I selected the color one, and I masked it to that, and I just switched it from, because I had a black and white image, I had to use a Luma mask rather than an alpha mask. But that's just kind of clicking around. So if you want, to I don't know. What's that? Nah, we need something to put in as a background so that we can, although this is kind of small, but that's okay. All right, go back to my flames. Of course, that video was too small. I wasn't paying attention. So it's fairly easy to do the mask. And you can, I don't know, I mean, you can take that and, you can also color mode on that. You could screen it or overlay it. I don't know. Do different things to try to blend it in, maybe. Like you do with, and really what I kind of like about After Effects over Premiere is, it's very much like Photoshop from the standpoint of you layer things. You try different layer blending modes, you try different effects, you just kind of build stuff up. And then when your composition window gets to be this long, and you can't keep anything straight, you select a group of items and you pre-compose those, you compress them down into basically a group, So I think it helps to think of After Effects kind of like a motion version of Photoshop, by and large, just with a lot of extra stuff. So, but that's how you do it. And if this didn't blend over top very well, I could always go back to that alpha mask, to the black and white, and adjust that black and white, until it looked right.